It's important, but no one's talking about it. From January 2015 through January 2000, December 2024 is a decade of African descendants. What an opportunity for us in the Caribbean, us in Latin America, us in Canada, and us in other regions, Central America and the United States, to talk about their Afro descendants, not only to explore their cultural life and political life, but also to talk about the issues that their real life conditions at this particular moment. Over 200 million Afro descendants live in this hemisphere, all the way up here. The largest number being 100 million self-defined Afro descendants in Brazil. The place where the most slaves were imported was Brazil. And so we have this opportunity to use this moment to clarify, to come together, whatever the issues are, whether it's the issue of reparations, which Sir Hilary Beckles has been very extraordinary about in studying and making an argument for that, whether it's those other issues, Ralph Gasau, who from the St. Grenadines has talked about the premier there. How do we come together using formations such as CARICOM, the conversations that I had over before his passing in 2013 with President Hugo Chavez, who when I first met him, the first question he asked me, this is statescraft. His first question to me, what's happening in Haiti? When I met him in 2003, what's happening in Haiti? You know, we owe so much to the Haitian people. We of Latin America, we of the Caribbean, we all owe so much to the Haitian people. He said, and when I talked about the issues of Afro descendants, he says, look at my hair. My grandmother's African. So there's this connection that we have to find some sort of, use that as a platform. And I'm using platform, not to do studies, but how do we come up with statecraft, using statecraft in various ways, from building networks to network, having an understanding that we want to not only express what the needs are and demands are, but at the same time, how do we use political action to get those needs and demands acted upon. And then we talk about that using the millennial goals, United Nations. I've been a goodwill ambassador in some capacity for the United Nations, the United Nations Development Program, the United Nations UNICEF Children's Program, Emergency Children Program for the last 20 years. So where do we now use those platforms to say that we're here to change the paradigm, to change the narrative, to talk about the narrative. And hopefully culture, art is always going to be, everyone is going to be expressed at this table, is always a fundamental part of that. A fundamental part of it. When we talk about culture, what do we mean about culture? It's our everyday actions as beings and human beings over the period, over our life. It's a collection of all those things that make us human, that creates and recreates and reinforces and reimagines imagination, reimagines society and the world we live in. We have an opportunity to do that. I'm proud that BAM, the Bahamian government, culture, are talking about this in a profound way, in a way. It's not only to talk about how we can train actors or how we could train this. How do we create cultural workers? That's what it is. How do we now create cultural workers in the shape of, and that they themselves become the stewards of their own history, the stewards of the future to come. Paul Robeson also said that each generation makes its own history, and they're defined by the history that they make. What does this new generation do within the 21st century? When I had a meeting with the Vice President of Cuba in January, the first thing we talked about is culture. He said the first thing he did was say, what are we doing now here in Cuba to train the new cultural leaders, the new artists at this particular point in time in the 21st? What are we doing? What is their calling? Their calling is so much: war, peace, climate change, global conflict. All those are the callings. This is a region of peace here. CARICOM is defined. CELAC has defined. These organizations, these state organizations have defined that this is a region of peace. How do we build peace and prosperity using culture as a platform for that? That's what our conversation had begun there, but there's so many places where that conversation has to go as well. Thank you.